My sister was always the star, and I was her shadow, invisible in my own family. At her fancy party, I sat in the corner, swallowing my hurt, until a stranger looked me in the eyes and said, "Anna Davis, your scripts changed my life." The room went dead silent. Then I found out the secret my sister had been hiding from me. And the truth that came out that night tore our family apart like a bolt of lightning. The invitation sat on my beat-up kitchen table in Brooklyn, its glossy surface gleaming like it was mocking the chipped countertop, piled high with unpaid bills and empty coffee mugs. Caitlin Davis invites you to celebrate her 35th birthday. My older sister, Caitlin, was a national TV star. Her face glowed on billboards from Manhattan to LA. Her name rang out in every household like a precious anthem of success. This invitation wasn't a request. It was a command to show up at her victory lap. So I, Anna Davis, 30 years old, could feel invisible again, fading into her shine like a shadow at noon. In our family, Caitlin's name was spoken with reverence, like a prayer. My dad, Richard, a lawyer with a steel reputation, talked about her with pride, his voice booming like he was in a courtroom. "Caitlin's our pride and joy, a real star." Mom, Susan, adjusting her designer glasses, would add with a dramatic sigh, "Anna, sweetie, we're so worried about your future." Those words burned like an old scar, one I felt every time I heard her heavy sigh. Their disappointment was like oxygen being sucked out of the room. I was suffocating in it, struggling to find myself. Caitlin shot to the stars. Host of the talk show Morning with Caitlin, Emmy nominee, with million-dollar contracts and a legion of fans. Family dinners turned into her personal victory parade. I'd sit there, poking at my food, while Dad praised her. "Caitlin just signed a deal with NBC." Mom would chime in, her eyes sparkling like she was the one on stage. "She inspires millions." I'd try to slip in a word about my ideas. Scripts for TV shows. Stories about people who fight, love, lose, and find themselves. But Mom would just smile, her voice soft but sharp as a blade. "That's cute, Anna, but maybe you could help Caitlin with her show. That's real work." I turned down the stable jobs they pushed on me. After college, I chose to write. At night, in my tiny Brooklyn apartment, smelling of cheap coffee, old books, and damp from a leaky pipe, I poured my heart into scripts. They were stories about women who rise after falling, families torn apart by secrets, love that crumbles and rebuilds. I sent them to producers under a pseudonym, Anna Clark. I didn't want to be judged as Caitlin's sister. I wanted my words to speak for me. My project, Hard on Screen, came from pain. Volunteering at a women's support center in New York, I saw them wrestle with trauma, injustice, bureaucracy. I saw a woman with trembling hands talk about escaping her abusive husband, another with lifeless eyes searching for a doctor for her sick kid. Their stories became mine. I wrote a script about a woman who rises after her husband's betrayal, finding strength in a community like hers. It was my heart's cry, my way of telling the world, I'm here. I submitted it to a screenwriting contest in LA, and it won. A producer, Jacob Levi, a big name in Hollywood, saw its potential. We started working together in a cramped office in Manhattan, where it smelled of fresh paint, his strong espresso, and hope. Heart on Screen grew. First 500 viewers on a small streaming platform, then 10,000, then 1 million. Netflix took notice, and we signed a deal for the first season. I didn't tell my family. They wouldn't have believed me. Once, I tried to share with Mom, sitting at her marble kitchen counter. "My show's launched. It's streaming now." She nodded absently, her eyes glued to her phone. "That's nice, But did you hear Caitlin's hosting a ceremony in LA? I felt my heart tighten, like someone had wrapped it in barbed wire. I wanted to scream, "Look at me! Hear me!" But instead, I smiled, swallowed the pain, and left. Years of solitude in my apartment, where the only sounds were the ticking of an old clock and the clack of my keyboard, taught me to keep the hurt inside. But it was building, like water behind a dam, ready to burst. Caitlin's birthday was set to happen at Stellar, a restaurant in Midtown Manhattan, where every table screamed wealth and status. Crystal chandeliers cast light like diamonds, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and truffle oil. I knew the script. I was the prop. Caitlin was the star. But that night, something in me broke. I was done being a shadow. Instead of my usual gray sweater, which Mom always called practical, I picked a deep emerald dress, clinging like a second skin, with a plunging neckline that screamed confidence. It was my quiet rebellion, my challenge to their expectations. I looked in the mirror, ran my hand over the fabric, feeling it glide against my skin, and thought, tonight I won't disappear. Stellar glowed with luxury. Crystal chandeliers, the soft murmur of waiters sizing up your status by your clothes. The clink of glasses echoing wealth. I walked in, my throat tight with nerves, like I was stepping onto a stage where I didn't belong. My family was at the center table, Caitlin in the middle, a queen on her throne. Her golden dress shimmered like sunlight. Her smile rehearsed for cameras, perfect as a mask. Dad, Richard, held a glass, telling her sponsors about her latest NBC deal, his voice loud as a sermon. Mom, Susan, fussed over Caitlin, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle on her dress, her fingers trembling, like she was afraid Caitlin might vanish if she stopped touching her. "Anna, you're here!" Mom exclaimed, her smile tight as a wire about to snap. Her eyes flicked over my dress with a hint of surprise, almost unease, like I'd broken an unspoken rule. Caitlin tossed out, not looking up from her champagne glass. "Glad you crawled out of your cave, sis." Her voice was sweet as honey, but laced with venom, like a snake's bite. I clenched my jaw, feeling anger bubble up inside, hot and bitter like molten metal. My fingers gripped my clutch, nails digging into my palms, but I smiled, swallowing the pain like a bitter pill. Dinner followed the usual script. Toasts to Caitlin, her awards, her genius. Dad raised his glass, his voice thundering like a storm. "To Caitlin, our pride, the star lighting up America." Mom jumped in, her eyes shining like she was on stage. "She inspires millions, and we're so proud." When Caitlin's sponsor, an older man named Arthur, asked what I did, I opened my mouth. "I'm working on a show." But Dad cut me off, his tone patronizing, like he was talking to a kid. "Anna's our dreamer, always scribbling her little stories. When are you getting a real job, honey?" Caitlin smirked, her lips curling. She's always lost in her fantasies. Anger burned like a red-hot wire, tightening around my chest. My hands shook. I gripped the napkin so hard the fabric creaked under my fingers. I wanted to scream, to unleash years of pain, humiliation, loneliness, but I stared at the tablecloth's intricate swirls, like they could hide me from their words. A lump lodged in my throat, hot and heavy as a stone I couldn't swallow. My heart pounded like a drum, counting down to an explosion. Then everything changed. Jacob Levi, my producer, was at the next table. He stood up, his presence towering like a lighthouse in a storm, and walked over. His dark, sharp eyes locked onto mine, and he said, his voice solid as granite, "Anna Davis, your script for Heart on Screen is the best thing I've seen in 20 years in this business. We're launching a second season, and it's all because of you." The room froze. Time slowed like a movie in slow motion. Dad dropped his fork, its clatter echoing through the room like a gunshot shattering the silence. Mom grabbed her necklace, her fingers trembling, her eyes wide as a deer caught in headlights. Caitlin paled, her perfect smile vanishing, leaving a mask of shock, like someone had ripped off her skin. "Anna? A screenwriter?" she breathed, her voice hoarse, like the word screenwriter was poison burning her throat. Jacob, oblivious to the tension, went on, his voice warm with admiration, like he was talking about a miracle. "Your stories save people. My sister Emily went through a divorce that nearly broke her. She watched Heart on Screen, and your words, Anna, your stories about women finding themselves, gave her hope. She cried, saying it saved her life. We're nominated for a Writers Guild Award, Anna, and it's all you." His words were like warm light breaking through darkness. Like the first ray of sun after a long night. My heart clenched, then bloomed, like a flower soaking in warmth. Pride, which I'd buried for so long, exploded inside me like fireworks, but it mixed with shock, disbelief. I could barely breathe, my hands shaking like leaves in the wind, my eyes stinging with tears I didn't want to show. Caitlin, scrambling to regain control, forced a smile, but her voice wavered like glass about to crack. "Well, Anna's always loved her little projects." Her fingers gripped her glass so tight, her knuckles turned white as marble. I saw her eyes dart, searching for a way to steal the spotlight back, like I'd taken her light. But something clicked inside me. I was done staying quiet. My shadow was fading, and I felt my real voice clawing its way out. Jacob frowned, his gaze sharp as a scalpel cutting through lies. "Little, you didn't tell your family? Heart on Screen is a hit. 10 million views on Netflix. And by the way, Caitlin." He paused, the air thickening like a storm was brewing. "Your latest talk show segment, the one about a woman rising after betrayal? It's eerily similar to Anna's draft I saw 2 years ago." Silence hit like an explosion's aftermath. Dad coughed, his face flushing red as a ripe tomato, his eyes darting like he was looking for an escape. Mom whispered, her voice trembling like a leaf. "Caitlin, is that true?" Caitlin shot up, her chair scraping like a scream, her voice cracking into a shriek. "That's ridiculous! I write my own stuff!" But her eyes flickered, like a trapped animal, betraying her lie, like the truth was choking her from within. I remembered showing her my draft 2 years ago. We were in her lavish Upper East Side apartment, her marble table gleaming like a mirror reflecting her perfect life. She flipped through the pages, her long nails tapping, her lips curling into a condescending smile. Cute. Really touching. "Can I get a copy? I'd love to draw some inspiration." I trusted her, my sister, my idol, my childhood beacon. I gave her the file, thinking she just wanted to support me. Now, I realized. She stole my idea, claimed it as her own, like a trophy to bolster her fame. The pain of betrayal was a knife plunging into my heart, sharp and cold, cutting to the bone. My hands shook, nails digging into my palms, leaving red crescent marks, but I couldn't look away from her face. From her lie, crumbling before me. Arthur, Caitlin's sponsor, stood, his face hard as granite. "Caitlin, this is a serious accusation. If it's true, it could end your career." His voice was heavy, like a judge's gavel. Caitlin tried to smile, but her lips trembled, like she was holding a cracking mask. "It's a misunderstanding. Anna, tell them." All eyes turned to me. Their stares were like spotlights, searing my skin, like I was on stage under 1,000 gazes. My chest tightened, my heart pounding so loud I thought they'd hear it. But resolve grew inside me, a flame that wouldn't die. I stood, my legs shaking, but my voice was calm, steady as steel. I sent Caitlin the draft 2 years ago. She knew it was mine. Heart on Screen is my project, my soul, my fight. We've got funding for a second season, and our show's helping people worldwide. I'm done being a shadow, Caitlin. I'm done staying quiet. My words hung in the air, like the echo of a gunshot. Caitlin stared at me, her eyes brimming with tears, but behind them I saw anger, fear, desperation. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her mask shattered, and for the first time, I saw the real her. Vulnerable, broken, but still clinging to her lie. Dad, usually loud as a preacher, was silent, his face gray as ash after a fire. Mom sobbed, her tears falling like rain on shattered glass, her voice trembling. Anna, we didn't know. We thought it was just a hobby. But then her friend Margie, sitting at the table, cut in. Her voice was sharp, like a bell slicing through silence. Susan, you knew. I heard you at last year's charity gala in the Hamptons. You said Anna was messing around with some nonsense. You even laughed, saying Caitlin was the only star in the family, and Anna was just a shadow who'd never step into the light. I froze. My lungs collapsed, like someone had sucked the air out of them. Mom knew? She didn't just ignore my achievements. She deliberately downplayed them, propping up Caitlin's image, keeping her perfect family where only one daughter shone. The pain of this betrayal cut deeper than Caitlin's. It was a bottomless pit, and I was falling, my heart tearing apart. I looked at Mom, her tears now empty, like her words, like her love, which had always come with conditions. You knew. I said, my voice quiet but shaking with barely contained rage, like a string stretched to breaking. You chose to stay quiet. You chose her. Mom sobbed louder, her hands covering her face, like she could hide from the truth. Anna, we wanted to protect you. We were scared you'd fail, that people would laugh. But her words were like wind scattering ash. They couldn't fix anything. Dad finally spoke, his voice rough, like the words were scraping his throat. Anna, we got it wrong. We didn't see what you were doing. His words were hollow, a late apology fading into nothing. Tears burned my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. They wouldn't see my pain break through. Caitlin, losing it, shouted, her voice raw with desperation, like a drowning person gasping. You're all ganging up on me. Anna, you've always been jealous. You wanted to steal my spotlight. Her accusation was a slap, hot and humiliating, like she'd hit me in front of everyone. Jealous? Me, who'd stayed silent for years while she soaked up the glory? Me, who hid my wins to spare her ego? My anger flared like a wildfire, but I held it back, my fists clenched, nails biting into my skin. Jacob added, his voice cold as ice cutting through the air. Caitlin, I checked the dates. Your segment aired a month after Anna showed you the draft. It's not a coincidence. I saw her notes, her emails, her story. It's hers. His words were a final verdict, unyielding and absolute. Arthur stood, his face stone cold, like a statue. Caitlin, we'll discuss this with your producers. Plagiarism is a career ender. You realize you risked everything. Caitlin's eyes filled with tears, but I felt no pity. She'd chosen this path. Her shame was like rain that couldn't wash away her guilt. Dinner ended in a deafening silence, the kind that follows a disaster. Guests whispered, their glances like needles pricking my skin. Waiters avoided our table. Like we were contagious. Mom tried to justify herself, her voice faint as a breeze. Anna, we just wanted to protect Caitlin. Dad stayed quiet, for the first time in years, at a loss for words, his face gray as ash. Caitlin stormed out, slamming the door, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a metronome, marking the end of her reign. I stepped out of the restaurant into the cool New York night, feeling a heavy weight lift off my shoulders. The air smelled of freedom, asphalt, and distant salt water. Like the city was whispering, "You did it." My phone buzzed. Mom, Dad, Caitlin. Their names flashed on the screen like ghosts from the past, but I didn't answer. I needed time to breathe, to figure out who I was without their shadows. A few days later, I got a letter from Margie, Mom's friend. She said she couldn't stay silent. Turns out, Dad didn't just ignore my work. He actively spread rumors about my failure. At charity dinners in the Hamptons, while hyping Caitlin to his colleagues, he'd say, "Anna? She's dabbling in some nonsense, not like Caitlin, a real star." He didn't do it out of malice, but to protect the family's image, to keep anyone from asking about the other daughter who didn't fit their mold of success. The revelation hit like a lightning bolt, splitting my heart in two. My father, the man I'd respected despite his coldness, had deliberately erased me from the family story. The ground seemed to slip away, everything I'd believed in crumbling like a house of cards. I called him, my voice icy. "Why did you do it? Why did you lie about me?" He hesitated, his voice heavy, like he was carrying a boulder. "Anna, I thought I was protecting you. You picked such an unsteady path. I didn't want people judging you, laughing at you." His words were empty, like husks, like wind scattering ash. "You weren't protecting me," I said, tears burning my eyes, but I held them back. "You erased me. You chose Caitlin because she fit your idea of success. And me? I was the inconvenient truth." He went silent, and that silence was louder than any words. For the first time, I realized his love was conditional, tied to achievements he could brag about. It was a loss, like the death of an illusion I'd held on to my whole life. My hands shook, the phone nearly slipping from my fingers, but I held on, like it was my last anchor. A week later, I agreed to meet Caitlin at a cafe downtown. A cozy spot on the corner that smelled of fresh coffee and cinnamon. She looked worn out, no makeup, her hair in a messy ponytail, her eyes red like she'd been crying all night. Her confidence, her glow, had vanished like morning mist. She sat there fidgeting with a napkin, her fingers trembling like leaves in the wind. "Anna, I didn't mean to," she started, her voice faint as a whisper. "I took your story because I was scared I couldn't keep up. You were always more talented, but I couldn't admit it." Her words hit like a punch, sudden and deafening. I expected excuses, lies, but not this raw truth. My sister, who I'd idolized as a kid, my guiding light, my ideal, now looked small and broken, like a child who'd lost her favorite toy. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, my voice quiet. But a storm raged inside, like all the years of pain, humiliation, and loneliness had fused into a hurricane. She looked down, her fingers tearing the napkin into tiny pieces. I was terrified of losing everything. Mom and Dad always held me up as the example. I was their golden girl, their pride. If you became the star, where would that leave me? Without that, who am I? Her words were a mirror, reflecting her weaknesses, her fears, her vulnerability. She wasn't a villain. She was a person, trapped in the same family expectations as me. But her choice cut me deeper than I could put into words. "You stole my work," I said, my voice trembling with pain, like a string stretched to snapping. "It's not just a mistake. It's betrayal. You knew how much it meant to me, and you took it anyway." Caitlin cried, her tears falling onto the table like raindrops. leaving dark spots on the wood. I'm ready to apologize publicly. I'll say the idea was yours. Please, Anna, give me a chance to fix this. I shook my head, feeling the last shred of hope in her sincerity crumble. I don't need your apologies. I need the truth, and I want you to face it yourself. A few days later, I found a letter in my mailbox. Not an email, but a real one, handwritten in Mom's neat script, the kind I remembered from childhood notes tucked in my lunchbox. I opened it, my fingers shaking like I was holding a bomb. She wrote, "Anna, my girl, I don't know where to start. I was blind, selfish, cowardly. I knew about your show. Caitlin told me about your draft 2 years ago. She said it was her inspiration, but I saw her fear. I was scared that if you succeeded, she'd break. I chose her because I thought she was weaker, that she needed my protection. I was wrong. Forgive me." Her words were a dagger plunging into an old wound now coated in salt. Mom knew. She'd known all along, and instead of supporting me, she chose Caitlin. Her fragile ego, her shine. Tears streamed down my cheeks, hot and bitter, like they were scorching my skin. I wanted to tear the letter, burn it, but instead I folded it, tucked it in my desk drawer next to Heart on Screen drafts. It was my trophy, my scar, my reminder of how far I'd come. A month after the dinner, I got an invite to the Writers Guild Awards in LA. Heart on Screen was nominated for Best Screenplay. I stood in front of my hotel room mirror, staring at my reflection in a black dress, sleek but elegant, like my newfound confidence. I wasn't a shadow anymore. I was Anna Davis, a screenwriter whose words changed lives. The ceremony was in a massive hall, the spotlights blinding, the air buzzing with whispers and anticipation. I sat in the front row next to Jacob, my heart pounding like a war drum. Then I saw her, Caitlin. She stood at the entrance, her dress red as blood, her face pale but determined. She'd come, despite everything. When the host announced Heart on Screen's nomination, the room erupted in applause. My script won. I walked to the stage, my legs trembling, but I held steady, like I was carrying a torch in the dark. I started my speech, my voice firm, though emotions churned inside like a river about to overflow. This show is about women who find themselves, despite pain, despite betrayal. It's my story, my fight, my victory. Then Caitlin stood. She rose from the back rows, her steps echoing like hammer strikes. Everyone turned to her, cameras catching her face, her tear-filled eyes. She grabbed a mic, her voice shaking but loud. "I have to tell the truth. Heart on Screen is Anna's work. I stole her idea 2 years ago because I was afraid of losing my fame. I was selfish, cowardly. Anna, forgive me." The room gasped. Cameras swung to me, their lenses like eyes waiting for my reaction. My heart squeezed, like someone was crushing it in their fist. I wanted to hate her, to yell. But instead, I nodded, my voice soft but clear. "Thank you, Caitlin. The truth sets us free." Her public confession was an explosion that destroyed her career. Tabloids pounced like vultures. Headlines screaming, "Caitlin Davis accused of plagiarism." Her show was canceled. Sponsors dropped her. But I didn't feel joy. I felt peace, like the calm after a long storm when the sky finally clears. A year later, Caitlin showed up at my Manhattan office. I was in a meeting with my team, planning Heart on Screen's 3rd season, when she walked in, her frame thin, almost fragile. Her hair was in a simple ponytail, her face bare, but her eyes held a determination I'd never seen. "I need to talk," she said, her voice quiet but firm, like she was gearing up for a fight. I sent the team away, closed the door, my heart racing like it sensed a storm. "I'm working with women who've survived abuse," she began, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "Your show taught me I can be more than a star. I left showbiz, Anna. I'm with a nonprofit, helping women like the ones you write about. I want to collaborate. We could make a project, a series or documentary about their stories. You'd be the lead writer. I don't want fame. I want to fix what I broke." Her offer was like thunder in a clear sky. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to say no, slam the door, leave her in the past where she couldn't hurt me again. But another part, the one that wrote Heart on Screen, saw a chance, not for her, but for the women whose stories we could tell. "I need to think about it," I said, feeling anger and hope wrestle inside me, like two beasts fighting for my soul. A few months later, I agreed to meet my parents at their house in Connecticut. The scent of Mom's roses and leather couches brought back childhood memories. Days when I ran through the garden and Caitlin taught me to ride a bike. But now those memories were bitter, like coffee left out overnight. I sat across from them, my hands resting on my knees, like I was afraid they'd betray my nerves. "Anna, we were wrong," Dad started, his voice hoarse, like he hadn't slept in days. "We didn't see you. We saw Caitlin because she was easier. Her success was something we understood. Your path was a mystery to us." His eyes were wet, and for the first time, I saw regret in them. Deep as an ocean, not judgment. Mom cried, her hands trembling like leaves. "We were scared for you, Anna. We thought your path was too risky, that you'd break. We chose Caitlin because she seemed stronger, but we were wrong. You're our biggest lesson." Her words were like balm on a wound, but the wound was too deep to heal instantly. I stayed silent, tears burning my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. "I don't want your pride now," I said, my voice calm, but firm as stone. "I wanted you to see me back then, when I was struggling, when I fell and got back up. Your love was conditional, and it broke me. But I found myself, despite you." They sat in silence, their faces like mirrors reflecting their guilt. For the first time, I felt they were listening, really listening. "We want to try again," Dad said, his voice soft, almost pleading. "We want to be part of your life." I nodded, but promised nothing. Forgiveness is a journey, and I'd only just started. Today, I stand on my own. Heart on Screen isn't just a show. It's my triumph over the shadow I lived in. We launched a third season, won another award, and our stories are watched by millions worldwide. My team, Jacob, our editors, our actors, is my real family, the ones who see me, hear me, believe in me. Caitlin's working on our new project, a documentary about women who've survived abuse. She's not chasing fame, and I see change in her, but I keep my distance. Her letter, her confession, her steps toward redemption are her path, not mine. I've forgiven her, but I haven't forgotten. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's freedom from pain. My parents come to premieres now, sitting in the audience, their eyes full of pride. But I don't seek their approval anymore. I'm searching for myself, in the words I write, the stories I tell, the life I'm building. My story isn't about revenge or beating my family. It's about finding my voice, stepping out of the shadow, and becoming my own light. And that light burns so bright now, no one, not Caitlin, not my parents, not the world, can dim it. What's your deal with your siblings? Do you parents treat you the same? Share your story. Let's lift each other up.